Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the RSIS seminar on Beijing's National Security Strategy after the 20th Communist Party Congress. Today, I'm very delighted to have with us Professor Wang Jisi, who is visiting RSIS as the Nian Gongxi Professor of International Relations at RSIS. I believe all of us here know Professor Wang Jisi. He's very well known and one of the most illustrious and prominent Chinese foreign policy experts. But if you allow me, let me briefly introduce and to read out his illustrious CV. Professor Wang Jisi is the founding president of the Institute of the International and Strategic Studies at Beijing University. He served as president of IISS from 2013 to 2022, right? And he is also Beijing University Boya Chair Professor Emeritus, having taught at the University School of International Studies. Indeed, he was the Dean of the School of International Studies at Beijing University from 2005 to 2013, right? And he was also concurrently director of the Institute of International Strategic Studies of the Central Party School of the Communist Party of China from 2001 to 2009. He served as a member of the Foreign Policy Advisory Committee of China's Foreign Ministry from 2008 to 2006. Right? Without further ado, may I now invite Professor Wang Jisi to illuminate us with his insights. Professor Wang, please.
I'm very glad to speak to this very distinguished audience today. And my topic is Beijing's national security strategy after the 20th Party Congress. I'm not new to Singapore, and Singapore is not new to me. My first visit to Singapore dated back to 1985, when I was a very junior scholar from Beijing University, and my host was the National University of Singapore, Political Science Department. So I remember many details of that time, and also I came back many times after that. Where's the slide? That is the slide. And I come here to learn as well, so that I have to give first. That is, I present my views on the topic, on China's decision-making processes, and the substance of China's national security strategy. First, the concept. Xi Jinping has turned national security into a key paradigm that permeates all aspects of China's governance. His expanding comprehensive national security concept now comprises 16 types of security. Xi has also formalized new implementation systems, from laws and regulations to institutions. Xi has also formalized new implementation systems, from laws and regulations to institutions and mass mobilization campaigns. I'll explain a little bit more. China has passed quite a few laws, like the National Security Law, National Intelligence Law, Anti-Foreign Spy Law, and many other laws and many regulations. And there are training programs for people like ourselves, university professors and others, on national security issues. This new focus on keeping China safe is driven by perceptions of internal and external threats. It also serves as a strategy to hedge legitimacy risks and ensure continued support for the Communist Party of China's rule as China shifts away from a development-first model. So I emphasize here that in the past, when we began to embark on reform and opening, the emphasis was on economic development. Economic development is still a top priority, but national security in other countries as well as in China have been elevated into a higher place. So China is not an exception. For instance, when I studied in the United States, I visited the United States several times, including twice last year, and the Americans told me that national security should override economic interests. So you people, doing business in China should take national security first. And we in China also are reminded the need to enhance our national security consciousness. What is national security in China? 16 items. Political security is supposed to maintain regime stability and policy supremacy. So, in Xi Jinping's own words, national security is centered on political security. And political security is centered on the security of the Communist Party, or the system, the socialist system. So 15 items are after political security. I won't repeat all of these, including security of overseas interests. It is basically referring to Belt and Road Initiative. Citizens and companies abroad, they should be part of our national security. Of course, there are other very important security issues like territorial integrity that is related to Taiwan, and so on and so forth. So security is very comprehensive. And we also include non-traditional security issues in our national security strategy. Beijing's quest for comprehensive national security formula has reshaped China's policy making. The result is a state of hyper-vigilance with wide-reaching effects on state-society relations, China's economic growth model, and how the leadership enforces its interests abroad. This securitization of everything, and in China we say, 安全压倒一切, extends beyond Xi's tenure and will continue to define China's domestic and international behavior. This new paradigm implies clear and new risks and challenges for governments, businesses, and non-state actors engaging with China. The trend toward the securitization of everything will likely accelerate. The trend toward the securitization of everything will likely accelerate. However, domestic criticism reveals it is not uncontested, and parties, state actors are still assessing the risks to China's economic development and international standing. That means some people in China are trying to argue that, of course, economic growth is still the first priority. And if we overemphasize traditional security issues like Taiwan and competition with the United States, that might sacrifice China's economic development. But this is a minority view. And what are these institutions? The National Security Commission, or NSC, of the Communist Party of China was established officially in November 2013, and Xi Jinping was and still is its chairman. And as a scholar, I participated in some of their work, and I know some of the people there. The office of the NSC, what we call 国家安全委员会办公室, at the office runs the day-to-day work. And the first couple of people who are running the office was headed by Li Zhanshu, and Li Zhanshu later became the chairman of the National People's Congress. He just retired after the party congress, and he was very important on the standing committee of the Politburo. And he was assisted by Mr. Cai Qi, and Cai Qi now is number 3 of the party echelon, only after Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang. So that shows that Cai Qi knows a great deal about national security and international affairs. And now the current head running the office, day-to-day work, is Mr. Liu Haixing. And Liu Haixing originally was in the foreign ministry, in charge of China's relations with European countries. And his boss was Ding Xuexiang. And Ding Xuexiang is also on the standing committee now, and he's number 6. And he was director of Xi Jinping's office at the time. And now the office of the Xi Jinping's, what do you call it, the Central Committee office is headed by Cai Qi. And its address was originally within Zhongnanhai, the headquarters of the Central Committee. Now it moved out to still a very central place in Beijing, near Wangfujing. I want to emphasize that the function of the National Security Commission is different from its counterparts in the United States and elsewhere. First of all, it is a party commission. It is not a government department. So it is called the National Security Commission of the party, of the Communist Party of China. So it is, first of all, a party organization. And national security is party security as well. This is very important to know. It's not like some other countries where national security is established under the government. And another thing is that it does not have a function to engage other governments, the foreign governments. The people I named did not have a chance to see foreigners, especially not officially. Of course, there was an exception. Li Zhanshu went to Russia when he was head of the National Security Commission, but that was very special. And Li Zhanshu went to Russia again last year. I think it was last year as chairman of the National People's Congress. And so it is very special. Some Americans say, you have a new National Security Commission, so we should visit with your office. That is not possible because they are not supposed to see foreigners face to face. I don't rule out the possibility of meeting privately meeting some foreigners, but I don't know whether that is true or not. Then I go to the 4 stages of China's national security strategy since 1979. That was the year when China was embarking on reform and opening, and that was also the year when U.S.-China diplomatic relations was established. In this first stage, from 1979 to the Tiananmen Brainstorm in 1989, Beijing's major security concern at the stage was the potential risk of a definite tilt toward Washington in world affairs. There were people who say we are so too close to Washington because at the time China-Soviet Union relationship was very bad, and China tilted toward Washington at the time, but it was somewhat controversial in the early 1980s. So that might result in reduced bargaining power and maneuverability in world affairs. Some people say we are too close to that phase, too remote from the Soviet Union, which will go back to a central place, to a more balancing position. That was in the 1980s. Meanwhile, China's reform and opening led its leaders to re-evaluate Sino-Soviet ideological debates and military tensions in the Cold War era. And soon after the establishment of relations with the United States, I remember in 1982, when the Soviet leader Brezhnev died, China sent its foreign minister to Russia trying to re-establish some connection with the Soviet Union. And in the 1980s, continuous domestic campaigns against bourgeois liberalization was reminiscent of Mao Zedong's warning of peaceful evolution toward capitalism. It was peaceful evolution. Today we call it color revolution. It's still, looming large in China's domestic affairs. This domestic trend, together with the weakening of the Soviet Union, has sowed the seed of China-U.S. potential political tensions that grew in later years, especially after 1989, when the United States led Western countries to sanction China based on its human rights concerns. China was very angry and very reactive. In the second stage, after Tiananmen and before the U.S. financial crisis in 2008, the key word of China's strategy toward the United States was stability. The three crises, beginning with U.S. visit in 1995, NATO's bombing of China's embassy in Yugoslavia, Belgrade in 1999, and the Hainan, or what we call EP3 incident in 2001, in which a Chinese jet fighter collided with a U.S. spy plane, disrupted stability and triggered political and intellectual debates in China about U.S. policy only temporarily. That means at the time we all have debates whether we had a good relationship with the United States that was too dangerous, and so on and so forth. The bilateral economic cooperation grew rapidly after China's entry into WTO in 2001. The 9/11 tragedy provided new grounds to coordinate Chinese and U.S. strategies. And the leader at the time was Jiang Zemin. He made a phone call to G.W. Bush saying, I'm sympathetic to your war on terror. North Korea's nuclear program and its first nuclear test in 2006 gave rise to another common strategic objective, that is the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. In the third stage, from 2009 to 2017, two developments triggered China's attitude toward the United States and sharpened the consciousness of strategic competition. First was the 2008 financial shock that wounded the United States economy severely, whereas China recovered soon from the turbulence that increased China's confidence. Second, in 2010, China's GDP surpassed that of Japan, making the PRC the second largest economy in the world. That again boosted the Chinese morale. In 2010 to 2011, Beijing indicated a subtle change of its foreign policy tone. A new guiding principle in international security strategy, persisting in keeping a low profile and proactively making a difference. In Chinese, is 坚持韬光养晦，积极有所作为。That is a step forward after 韬光养晦, after keeping low profile. So it's keeping low profile on the one hand, but you have to react more proactively on the other hand. That was the change. The change of tone was based on the reassessment of the power balance tilting toward China. Hence, the more proactive Chinese behavior in global affairs in later years. On the domestic front, the CPC under the leadership of Hu Jintao put forward in 2004 the target of building up a harmonious socialist society. Hu Jintao advocated in 2005 the construction of a harmonious world. So harmonious society in China, harmonious world on the globe, which contrasted sharply with the principle of fighting against hegemonism and power politics. Code words for U.S. preponderance. Peaceful rights, or its variation, peaceful development, became the motto of Chinese foreign policy in the mid-20th. So in foreign relations, China continues to support those countries that also resist U.S. pressures and foster forces in both developing and developed world countries that may be sympathetic to China. Beijing tremendously promoted its international public relations work. You can see, for instance, posters everywhere in the world, and we have done a great deal of propaganda work, even in the United States. After Xi Jinping became the top leader of China in 2012, the emphasis in his foreign policy philosophy was further altered to reflect Xi's call for carrying forward the spirit of struggle and improving the ability of struggle. It is very commonly said in China that everybody knows 敢于斗争,善于斗争. That is carrying forward the spirit of struggle and improving the ability of struggle. Since the 19th CPC National Congress in 2017, in dimensions of U.S.-China interaction, China's approach in the U.S. was highlighted by a strengthened resolve of fighting against U.S. policies and actions. So, change again and again in Jiang years, the tone, especially after embassy bombing, was low. Fight against hegemonism was the motto at the time, and in Hu Jintao years, the emphasis was on harmonious society at home and harmonious society, harmonious world in global affairs. And after Xi Jinping took power, he emphasized struggle again. This PRC's official line encouraged nationalistic sentiments and triumphalism in social media unfavorable to the U.S. and discouraged people from voicing moderate views. Global Times and other media acclaimed China's wolf warrior diplomacy, named after the 2015 patriotic action film and its 2017 sequel. Those who are openly critical of such a diplomatic style run the risk of being attacked as traitors. Since the 18th Party Congress in 2012, the document, party document says, we have seen a sweeping and fundamental shift in the ideological domain. That means strengthening China's ideological work, strengthening China's patriotic education at every level of educational institutions, including primary schools, middle schools, and universities. The popular perception of China that U.S. power was steadily declining, whereas China would soon succeed the U.S. as #1 in the world, diminished the appeal of adhering to Deng Xiaoping's advocacy of keeping a low profile in the 1980s to 1990s. That means when China was much weaker than the United States, in early days we of course have to uphold the idea, the principle of keeping a low profile. But how about today? If when China is #2 and China is surpassing the United States in every domain of society, do we still want to keep a low profile? can we hide our ambitions? Can we hide our capabilities? That is a question very often asked by common people as well by international relations specialists. The consolidation of the CPC power would mean stronger spirit of struggle and more triumphalism to boost people's confidence and loyalty to the party and to the state. In the fourth stage, from 1917 to today, the CPC has further consolidated the power base, and Xi Jinping is now an indisputable primary leader. The PRC's national constitution was modified to ensure its continued tenure, as you see in the party congress. The last party congress reassures Xi Jinping's leadership for the next 5 years or even longer. National security centered on political security, regime security, and system security is now the priority, as I said before. And Xi Jinping just said last month in what we call two conferences, he said, I quote, "Security is the bedrock of development, while stability is a prerequisite for prosperity." That means it is more important than prosperity. We must fully promote the modernization of national defense and the armed forces and build the people's armed forces into a great wall of steel that effectively safeguards national security, national sovereignty, security, and development interests. It is very common to identify China's national security, national interest into two domains, that is sovereignty, security, and development interests. Now I move to the new features and trajectory after the 20th Party Congress. The comprehensive national security concept has turned into a guiding principle of policymaking. It is seen as a powerful ideological weapon under constant to respond to new threats, real or perceived. Where are the new threats? I'll discuss that now. New emphasis on this is a new feature of China national security strategy to intertwine between domestic and international threats. Where are the international threats? Basically, we refer to the United States and U.S.-led Western alliances against China. The United States formulated 5 Is, that is United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. It is a very powerful intelligence community. And the United States also formulated Quad, that is Australia, Japan, India, and the United States, and it now refer to what we call the Asia-Pacific region, as Indo-Pacific region. We cannot accept that formulation. And then the United States also, established the AUKUS, that is Australia, United States, Great Britain. The recent news is, I don't know whether it's true or not. France may join that, but I don't know. I would be surprised if France go that far. And Xi Jinping said recently, and many people noticed his remarks on March 6th this year, during the two conferences. He said Western countries led by the United States have implemented all-around containment, encirclement, and suppression of China, which has brought unprecedented severe challenges to our country's development. Does that mean that the United States should be held responsible for China's slowing down economy and other domestic difficulties? It's up to you to interpret. But I think it is true that, Chinese leaders are saying, well, because of the United States containment of China, we have some problems at home. Not all the problems, but many of the problems are related to the United States. Beijing's current behavior is not a temporary tightening. It can be seen from the long evolution of national security work. The securitization of everything is here to stay and will likely accelerate. The CCP or CPC believes threats that are at an all-time high, and that China's ability to maintain national security is still insufficient. So we would have to strengthen the national security work. It is still insufficient. Despite appearing to gain confidence in China's power capabilities, it feels the need to be prepared for the unexpected and vigilance in peacetime. That is in Chinese, 居安思危 vigilant in peacetime and prepare for the unexpected. What is the Chinese for that? I forgot. Anyway, China's policy toward the United States, Russia, Europe, Japan, ASEAN, and other areas could be better explained by understanding its national security strategy. Faced with the aftermath of the COVID pandemic crisis that has not completely faded away, the slowing down of economic growth in 2020 to 2023, the aging and shrinking population, the insufficient social welfare system, among other things, Beijing will have to take more effective measures to curb possible disturbances around the country. Meanwhile, turbulence is hitting the world, and I think the Communist Party leadership in recent years has realized that external threats, including non-traditional security issues like climate change and environmental degradation, and also terrorism and the spread out of diseases. And the Western countries are increasingly unfriendly toward the PRC. And I think Beijing knows very well that the United States is trying to strengthen its alliances with Europe, with European countries, and strengthen NATO and enhance its capabilities in the Asia-Pacific region, including strengthening alliances with Japan, although this is largely bilateral, but also North South Korea and some ASEAN countries. There is a fear that the United States may try to get NATO involved in the Asia-Pacific region. Also, there's also the fear that the United States wants to establish certain kind of NATO-type alliances system around China. And so, in particular, the United States has been imposing technological sanctions against China, aimed at preventing it from becoming a technological giant at par with America. And examples vary and are many. For instance, the U.S. sanctions against Huawei. I'm personally, I confess, I'm very supportive of Huawei. I went to Huawei many times, and I'm going there again in Shenzhen. A nice company, but they are surrounded by criticism. And I just speak to the Americans. I say, what is wrong with your relationship with Huawei? And their answer is very simple, very ideological. Huawei is part of Chinese Communist Party and state. Does Huawei have a party organization, party committee? Of course. You cannot deny that Huawei have to follow instructions from above. But that does not mean that it is doing the kind of work you are describing. But they said, you don't have to have any evidence because you have party committee and it is very advanced technologically. The military will come and say, you should do this, you should do that. And Huawei have to say, yes, we should do this, we should do that. So Huawei is, to me, is just the scapegoat. Now it comes TikTok. Is TikTok a Chinese company? Yes or no? It's internationally and run. Recently a Singaporean business person went to the United States to explain what TikTok is all about. But he was surrounded by members of Congress, and I think that the difficulty is there, and TikTok may no longer work that well in the United States. So this is very, to me, is very alarming. That is, the world is becoming technologically bifurcated. I'm still using my Huawei cell phone. I like it very much. But instead of like Microsoft, that in the future I will have to carry two iPhones, one Huawei and one Apple. Because Huawei might be banned in the States and Apple might be banned in China. Is that a possibility? Some people think it is possible because we can cut the technological world into two different systems, two different internet networks. I'm not a technician. I don't think that is very feasible, but I cannot deny that there are people who think that way, and people try to do that, this connection. So with the nightmare of decoupling with the United States, between China and the United States in technological terms. And the secessionist tendency in Taiwan is encouraged by U.S. support and the worsening of PRC-U.S. relations. Tensions will continue across the Taiwan Strait with the prospect of a military showdown looming larger. That is, I'm referring to the recent visit by Tsai Ing-wen to Latin America, and she will be on transit in New York City, and now in a few days she will visit Los Angeles in California and have meetings with people like the new speaker, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And I think China will react very strongly, but I don't know in what form exactly. Beijing's national security strategy is being tested by all these challenges, from domestic to international, from technological to military and political. So there is progress. I think under the Xi Jinping leadership, China has made great progress in controlling the internet, improving our military capabilities, and tightening control over society, and strengthening political education. But there's no easy solution to any of the problems I described. Thank you very much. Should I stop here?
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. Now we should have a Q&A and a discussion. But before we begin, allow me to take advantage of my position as the chair to pose the first question to Professor Wang. Professor Wang, earlier on I listened very carefully to what you said. And you mentioned about the shift in strategic thinking, right? Initially from Taogang Yang with a slight tweak to for a more proactive strategy. People talk of this as 奋发有为, strive for achievement. And then later on, you mentioned President Xi having this daring to struggle approach. There is this view, not my opinion of course, but I thought I'd seek your views on it. There is this view that in having this strategic shift, that China may have strategically overreached, meaning China is presenting its ambition too openly, and this, in some ways, the US sees that as a challenge to its primacy and dominance. So there's this view that maybe, perhaps should China actually try to hide its capabilities more, if that is possible. But so I thought wonder what is your view on that?
Well, I think there are several points I want to make in this to answer your question. First of all, it is a conventional wisdom in China, as I repeated. East rising, west, the east rising, the west declining. So we cannot hide our capabilities. And we have international programs everywhere, in Latin America, in Africa, and the United States cannot defeat us. And when some people say we are isolated by the United States, yes, to some extent that is true, because in Western countries we are not so much welcome. I went to Germany last year, and they had their national, what they call China strategy, a report that is not very friendly to China, and Eastern European countries, especially the Baltic countries, were leaning more toward the United States. Hungary is an exception. But if we look beyond the Western countries, we look at Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, we have many friends. People say we still have friends around the world. For instance, recently China played a role in the mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And why China? Because Russia is too preoccupied with its own conflict with Ukraine. And so it cannot play a too much larger role in the Middle East. And European countries, they are sanctioned against Iran. So how can they serve as a mediator? And United States, no possibility. But the Middle East countries, especially Saudi Arabia and Iran, need to have an international guarantee or a balancer between the two of them. So they chose China. So I think China is playing a role there, and China will also play a very active role in developing countries. So some people say we are isolated, but other people say we are moving ahead with we have more friends around the world, and especially in Africa. So and Belt and Road Initiative. So we are making progress in this area, and so the proactiveness will continue, and this is some way to show that the connection between international affairs and internal affairs. That this is a case to promote China's image in the world, but also promote the top leadership's image in China. So since I watch CCTV, the Central Television of China, every day, the evening news. Every evening, Xi Jinping meets with a foreign leader, Singaporean leader, Malaysian leader, and the Prime Minister from Spain at the same time, in the same period. And he calls a lot of international leaders to show his support of economic growth, and then China makes quite a few initiatives. I don't remember. One is on security, one is on development, and another one is on civilization. So it shows to the population that China is liked, it's popular around the world. So people come to China to say good things. Now we are saying we have a proposal to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. We don't usually read Western media. We're locked. I have some special device, a VPN, to watch international media. But most people simply watch Chinese TV, and Chinese website. So they are very confident that China is moving, is elevating itself. But the perception gap is enlarging between China and the Western world. That is, China says one thing, and the other people, especially the Westerners, are talking about another thing. And we don't compare notes. Some people are very surprised that Westerners, why are they thinking this way? Why are they discarding economic interests? Are they not making money in China? You want to make money, and you come to China. You do a decoupling with China. You're not making money, and we have our indigenous innovation. So we're not afraid of Western sanctions. That is the general public, what the general public thinks. Of course, the internet intelligentsia and within the small community of international relations specialists, there are different opinions, and we sometimes have debates.
Thank you so much. Well, that's a lot of food for thought. Now I'll open up the Q&A to the floor, and I see Professor Ian Chong. Before I begin, I would appreciate that when you ask the question, just briefly introduce yourself, right?
Hi, I'm Ian Chong from National University of Singapore. Professor Wang, it's good to see you again after so long, and welcome to Singapore. So my question picks up on some of the things that you had mentioned in your speech. You talked about this sort of rising sense of nationalism, this sense of China feeling that security is not sufficient. So I'm curious as to whether you could shed light on whether this sort of sense of nationalism is, whether it's controllable, because one of the things we know from history is that nationalism can sometimes get out of hand. And what would it mean for China to feel sufficient in terms of its security? And also I'm curious as to whether China can exercise, what it would take for China to exercise self-restraint, because the picture that you're painting is one, with the gap that you mentioned, is one that China is pushing forward. I say this simply because what it looks like is that we're looking at a security and we're looking at a locking in of a security dilemma, at least between China and the US, if not other states in Europe as well. So I'm asking this with the hope that you can shed light on how we break out of this type of a security dilemma. Thank you.
What is essentially his comments? Patriotism?
If I can quickly summarize, there is a security dilemma going on between China, the US, and a number of Western countries. So, and you also mentioned there is a widening perception gap, and if this continues, it seems that the security dilemma, the current situation, will become even worse. So, is there any way Beijing can do to improve the situation?
Yes, the security dilemma is very vivid between China and the United States, and I'm not optimistic at all on the U.S.-China relationship, and the military competition will continue. And I'm afraid, as I say in my slides, there could be a military showdown over the Taiwan issue or over the South China Sea. And people are talking about the security dilemma. People in China saying, well, we are gaining the upper hand. So why do we have to establish channels with American military? So we are not afraid. But there are some hidden reasons for China not to talk to the American and to the Japanese, on military affairs. There are difficulties internally. Some people do not have the language skills and professional skills to reach out to international interlocutors, and there are also regulations against Chinese military people from traveling. They have, for instance, I heard one military commander complaining that they have 1 year to travel abroad. So if they are invited, they have received 5 invitations. Very difficult to choose, and that is a very technical problem in China's reaching out. And when you say overreach, my friend Susan Shep wrote a book on overreach. That China is overreaching. To some extent, that is true. We spend a lot of money abroad, and we spend a lot of efforts to safeguarding China's territorial integrity, including the South China Sea, but that will continue.
Right. I will pass the floor to, in the order of hands that I see. First, the gentleman over there, and before the ambassador. Right, the gentleman over there.
Thank you. Adi Indonesia program, RSIS. So, Prof. One of the type of security that you mentioned is actually the security of overseas and the security of overseas interests. And so, what would be China's response to the existing military presence, military influence, and military exercise of U.S. and its allies in Southeast Asia? Thanks.
Okay, it seems that Scott, is it possible to have a mic for the? Okay, never mind. His question is that he's mentioning that F-16 planes, the US F-16 planes. If I may get your question correctly, so please correct me if I didn't get it correctly, is increasing in Southeast Asia, right? As exemplified by the growing number of F-16 planes, US military presence is increasing in Southeast Asia itself. What would be your take on that, or what would be the Chinese view on that?
I think the United States has a lot of friends and even allies in Southeast Asia. But they are different. You know, Vietnam is different from Singapore, and Cambodia is very friendly to China. And in the Philippines, the change of government changed a lot of things in its relationship with China, and the ambassador Marcos is shifting from the earlier mild approach to China to emphasizing security issues, and they are trying to involve the United States in safeguarding their territorial claims. So, and Malaysia is different, and Indonesia, I think we should know that Indonesia is and Malaysia are Muslim countries, and they have their reservations about the presence of the United States in this region. So China is taking advantage of all the differences. The ASEAN is a unit, is a group, but we have differentiated policies toward different ASEAN countries. And the most friendly to China is Cambodia, and another one is Laos. and Myanmar is a different case. They are run by the military government, so people have human rights concerns. I mean, the Westerners have human rights concerns about that. So our approach, I think, is to promote our relationship with all ASEAN countries, but we have different focuses and with different strategies. Especially, we have an advantage on economic issues. China is leading the greatest economic partners to almost all ASEAN countries. And the United States is trying to fight back, saying they will have somebody called the economic, I don't remember the exact name of their economic effort, but it is very superficial. I don't see a lot of substance in America's relationship with Southeast Asian countries in financial terms, economic terms. So the general sense in China is that we cannot say Southeast Asia is ours, but Southeast Asia is not theirs. we are closer to South Asia culturally and economically. And they have, the United States has advantage in military affairs. It has a stronger military presence in the region. But then we compete with the United States, not competing, not raising arms race with the United States, but we have to strengthen our relationship with the ASEAN countries in general. And then, as I said, we have differentiated approaches to different ASEAN countries.
Thank you. Can we have the Ambassador Nikolai? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Hu. My name is Nikolai Kudyshev. I'm Russian ambassador. Thank you, Professor Hu. My name is Nikolai Kudyshev. I'm Russia's ambassador of the Republic of Singapore. Esteemed Professor Wang Jisi, as you could possibly know, recently a new version of Russian foreign policy concept appeared. Magazine the It underlines the importance of Asia and the Pacific in Russia's foreign policy. It specifically underlines the importance of strategic partnership with China and with India, calls attention to ASEAN centrality and importance of strategic partnership between Russia and ASEAN, as well as regional architecture emerging around ASEAN and ASEAN-centric structures. It also promotes Russia's vision for Asia and the Pacific, the greater Eurasian partnership, bringing together Russia, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China naturally, and ASEAN countries. Esteemed Professor, how this new concept, new foreign policy concept, could fit Chinese national security strategy and Chinese regional view, if I may? Thank you so much.
I very much appreciate your comments and question. I think when you mentioned the Eurasia continent, and I know what you are talking about, because when we talk about Asia, the United States, when they talk about Asia, they basically talk about eastern part of Asia. They forget, and sometimes we forget, Asia is larger than East Asia, than Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia combined. That is, Central Asia is important to us. And we have very strong economic interest in Central Asia, so we are in line with Russia's what you call Eurasian Eurasian group, right? And we have the Belt and Road Initiative, and there should be some more connections between the two efforts. And you also talk about Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So when people talk about a not bipolar world, but bifurcated world, the Westerners have their own ideas, and we have Central Asia, we have Russia, we have some connections with Eastern European countries. They are different. Hungary is one country, and Serbia is a friend of China. So, and then a country I visited, Azerbaijan, and then Georgia and Armenia. All these countries now are relying on China's economic development and cooperation. So when we look at the world, we have a comprehensive concept, including all these countries. And I mentioned Africa and Latin America. So we are competing with the United States in all these areas. In the long run, we don't know who will win. But I'm sure that China's strategically closer to this region. And if our economy continues to grow at a reasonable speed, I think we are winning in the long run. But we have to take care of the local interests and the indigenous concerns in these countries. And when we talk about Russia-China relationship, Russia is, we have debates actually in China. Is Russia a European country or Asian country or Eurasian country? It's Russia is Russia. Russia, they have their identity debates as well within Russia, whether Russia should tilt toward the West and so on. So we are studying, but Russia is they have to look at Europe as their homeland. And the source of their civilization, that is different from China. So Russia and China should work together, and our identities are not identical. So we should understand that you have your concerns, we have our, and we have common concern and common interests, but they are not, we don't have identical interests. That is my answer to your question.
Thank you, Professor.
Right. I saw a hand over there. Raffaello? Raffaello? Yep.
Should I wait for the microphone?
Yep.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Raffaello Pantucci. I'm a researcher here at RSIS. Thank you, Professor, for your really interesting comments. I wanted to pick up a little bit on the previous question and where you left off, because the parts of the world you're talking about, Central Asia, South Asia, in particular countries that border China, have seen growing instability over the past couple of years. In Kazakhstan, we had shocking violence in early 2022. In Pakistan and Uzbekistan, we had large-scale trouble same year. You've had a shooting war between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. You've had Taliban take over in Afghanistan. You've had Pakistan growing levels of violence towards Chinese nationals and interests in the country. And of course, in India, there's a hardening relationship as well. So I'm wondering, how does China see dealing with these very immediate security issues that are right on the border? You talked a moment ago about growing economic prosperity maybe spilling over, but that's been true for a decade now, and we've seen the instability only getting worse. So I'm wondering, what is the practical security measures that China is looking or thinking about taking to deal with these specific problems right on its borders? Thank you.
Well, I think all the issues you raised are very important to China, and we have troubles. As you said, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, part of Bangladesh, there are problems rising up, and then our interests are affected. For instance, in recent months, there were attacks on Chinese citizens in Pakistan and elsewhere, and the Taliban. Well, my former student is now is China's special envoy to Afghanistan, and he goes to Russia and other countries and talk to his counterparts. But I don't know whether there's any solution to the turbulence in Afghanistan today. So I don't have any specific answer to your question. That is, China has to be concerned, but our policy tools are limited. One thing, as a scholar, I always promote the idea of understanding these countries more comprehensively. People should speak the local language. How many people can speak Arab and Persian and the local languages in other countries? We are not like the United States. They have their immigrants. They have immigrants from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, and so we have to increase our knowledge about all these regions and reach out. It takes time. So now we are having some training programs in China. In my own school, we have established a school of the Department of International Organization. It is prospering, and then China has established many schools, what we call the schools or institutes of 区域国别研究, that is area and country, state studies, but it is in a very preliminary stage. And given time, I think in the long run, we will have more specialists and more knowledge about international affairs, and we also try to play a role in international organizations, United Nations, different agencies, development agencies in various countries, and I think they are doing a good job. And so again, given time, China will be more, will have more knowledge about the outside world.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? At this point, actually, I have one quick question for you, Professor Wang. I recall reading your very influential 2012 paper, March Westwards, right? That some people have said that it is sort of like an intellectual basis for the BRI, because subsequently, after you published the paper, President Xi announced the BRI. Do you think that this strategy of marching westward, some would even say pivot to the west, is still relevant today, given that it appears that most of China's main national security threats appear to be in East Asia region? So I'm just wondering, what do you think of this march westwards strategy?
Oh, I don't think I played any role in the Belt and Road strategy or initiative. Some people read my paper in that regard, and some people came to me to ask more questions. So the original idea, after visiting the Middle East and South Asia and some other Eastern Central Asian states, I have more knowledge about that region. And when China opened to the outside world, it first went west rather than to the sea. And we were invaded. China was invaded by Western powers, Great Britain and France, and then we opened China, southwest China to southeast China to engage the international visitors. But so we should be reminded that that part of China is very important to us. And at that time we had a project called the 西部大开发. That is development in China's own west. So if we develop China's own west, we should turn around to see opportunities, beyond the borders in Xinjiang and in Tibet. For instance, I also visited Nepal. These countries are remote from Chinese consciousness, as if they did not exist. We say a lot. We think a lot of Singapore. Singapore and Thailand, people go to Southeast Asia as tourists, but very few people would go to the Central Asian as tourists. They are not open to us yet, but we have to go there, and they have their different opinions. Also, they have criticism of China. They are afraid of Chinese immigrants, for instance, Pakistan and other countries. So I'm still interested in this idea. I continue to say, well, we should look at the West, China's West, to see all the way from China's own West to the western part of Asia, and then all the way to Europe and the Middle East, Africa. And then if you go further west, you go to the United States. So my conception at the time was China is the central country. I mean, every country should say we are the center of the world, because the earth is round. I have only seen one or two exceptions. New Zealand. They don't see themselves as center of the world. But when I went to even Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, they see themselves as center of the world. It is true that they in history and in current stage they played a very important role. So if you look at the geography, China is to the west. Japan is our nearest, and Hawaii is our Middle East, and the United States is our Far East. Right?
Yes,
so why don't we think this way?
Correct.
And then we have the Far West, Europe. So, and again, politically, I'm not joking. Politically, when China reached this stage of development, are we a developing country or developed country? Yes, we are still a developing country. But do we want to be a developed country? We don't say that. But once you say we want to enrich China and make ourselves richer and then become more advanced, then we are close to the Western world, or to the developed world. The thing is, the problem there is politically, we will never become part of the West. Economically, we could be equally advanced with the United States and Europe, but politically, we are still very distinct. That is, in the long term, we do think about China's own identity. My own idea is that China should see itself as center of the world. That is not Sinocentric, but we can make a linkage. We can serve as a linkage between the developed world and developing world because we are in the middle. So China is a middle country in economic development. But this is far from the official thinking now. The top leadership always reminds us that we are only a developing country. We should side with the developing country. My idea is, yes, we are still developing, but we should serve as a bridge between the two worlds or different worlds, and elevate ourselves to a higher state rather than simply say, well, this part of the world.
Makes sense, right? Yes. The gentleman over there, yes. Maybe the mic, so that you don't. No words are being lost.
I can try to be loud enough.
Thank you, Professor. My name is Tejas Girish. I'm an MSc Strategic Studies student at RSIS. Coming on from the question that the gentleman posed, last year Wang Yi, in a discussion with his Indian counterpart, basically made a statement that the economic cooperation should go forward, but the border disputes should stay in their own place, wherein it basically gives an idea that all the security issues between two countries can be in their own limit while we trade with each other. Is taking that argument forward, does the Chinese foreign establishment or the Chinese CPC in itself sees the same vision being applied to ASEAN and other countries, wherein we'll just discuss about economic cooperation and we'll forget about, let's say, the South China Sea issue or the border disputes? Thank you very much, Professor.
The question about this.
It's about territorial disputes,
Yes,
but
yes.
just focus, shelf territorial disputes and just focus on economic cooperation.
Well, that is a dilemma. When China says it's difficult to explain to the honorary Chinese what is South China Sea. It is, some people say, even a high-ranking military officer said, when he talk about Nanzhongguohai or South China Sea, that it means the South China is China's, right? So we have the 9-dash line, and to most Chinese, who do not know very much about history, about the territorial disputes, they are saying that these islands are ours. So that is a principle. But Wang Yi's statement, he knows very well, and he served as a director of Asian affairs. He knows very well what the South Asians think about the territory. And the major concern there is the intervention or the involvement of the United States in the region. That is, we can solve our own problem with Southeast Asians. We are Asians. They are Americans. We don't want them to interfere. And so that is what you call code of conduct. And I think we have reached a stage that we should reach an agreement on the territorial disputes, shelve the disputes, and then we have code of conduct. That is my understanding of the situation. So I'm talking about this as if there's a common understanding in China about South China Sea, but the diplomats know very well what the problems are. Though they have to work on that, but they also have behind them the whole Chinese population saying, well, we have to watch you. Are you sacrificing China's, territorial rights to a foreign country? But also there are some hardliners and saying we could fight. These are small countries. Militarily is much weaker than China. The Philippines, well, they have a very small fleet, but that's no problem with us. We are only afraid of the United States. Now the United States is mobilizing its allies to be somewhat relevant to Southeast Asia. NATO is coming this way. They show their existence in the South China Sea and over the Taiwan Strait. So that is our concern. That is, with Southeast Asians, it's okay. But with the United States, it's not okay.
Right. Okay, the gentleman over there, please identify yourself. Do you have the mic with you? Yes. Yu Chen. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Yu Chen. I'm a PhD student in PPGA program here at TU. Thank you very much for the presentation today. And I have a specific question regarding, actually not today's topic, but Thursday's topic. You are talking about will the worsening China-US relations continue, which unfortunately I cannot attend the talk. So I'm asking here whether you see the possibility of changing it upwards. I think in a 2015 article you wrote in the end of the Obama period, you said there's still strategic malleability between China and the US because because the US foreign policy is not just determined by domestic determinants like American democratic system and so on and so forth, but also external environment like China and other countries' behaviors and policies and what they do, basically. So I'm just wondering, in short term, do you see there's still some strategic malleability between China and the US that can possibly change the current worsening situation? And in other words, whether you see any possibility of dialogue and cooperation can overcome the sort of military security dilemma and the rising nationalism on both sides. Thank you.
I will talk about this more specifically on Thursday, but to simplify my argument, I think there are different explanations of why the United States and China are not getting along with each other. The basic argument, the more conventional argument is that China is rising up, the United States is falling down. So we could win the competition with the United States. It's a very popular view in China. But I don't take this very seriously. Power balance view, because when I studied the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union improved their relations in the early 1970s, when the Soviet Union was rising up and the United States was falling down. So it is not necessary that China and the United States would have to fight if China is rising up. The problem is still basically their domestic politics. As I say very strongly in my presentation, we are more concerned about China's internal security. That is more important than China's external security. The problem is that the United States is trying to interfere with our domestic affairs in Xinjiang, in Tibet, in Hong Kong, and then after all in Taiwan. So that is China's domestic politics influencing China's approach to the United States. And they have, in recent years, they have their domestic politics as well, influencing their policy toward China. The only consensus between the Democrats and the Republicans is they are both attacking China, uniting the country together. Between the Congress and the administration, they are in line with each other. Between Democrats and the Republicans, China is a villain they want to criticize. Now we also have in China, we have been united by the external threat, that is United States. That is our domestic politics, but my study of international relations as a discipline move more and more to domestic politics of various countries. I don't know Singapore that well, but you also have your domestic politics, your succession process, your party system, and so on and so forth. So unless we know something about their domestic politics, we cannot make a sound judgment of their relationships. So, in essence, I'm arguing that because of domestic politics, it's very difficult to change the approach toward the other side. How can we say the United States is not our enemy, it's not our adversary? Talking to them is one thing, but to engage them they say they confess now they are in the past few years, no, in the past decades, and from 1979 to recent years, the United States approach to China was based on the notion that they could change China. They could change China internally, and then they had the notion that when China's younger generation rises up, more students are studying abroad, more interest in economic development, China will have to change into not so much communist, somewhat more capitalist. So given time, China will be more like the United States. That was their notion before. Now they understand, especially after the 18th Party Congress, 19th Party Congress, the 20th Party Congress, China is not only rising up, but China is consolidated its Communist Party's power base. So China is not changing to their image, to their expectation. And we have also had the notion that the United States, Donald Trump, he is only interested in making money. So if we sacrifice some of our interests to please him, the U.S.-China relationship will get better. Trade war is nothing, this is about money. So we have some ideas about United States politics, but that is not based on comprehensive understanding of the United States. In historical terms, it is a country that very different from China. It's not driven only by economic interest. They have their ideology, they have their value system. They also want to unite their country, overcome the racial tensions, and so on and so forth. So, yes, it is easy to imagine there should be more talks between the two countries, and we have done that before. In Obama years, there was the SNED, that is a security economic dialogue. Hundreds of people, American policymakers, came to China, and Chinese officials came to the United States to engage with each other in very extensive ways. What happened? Nothing happened. After that, what happened was the deterioration of relationship. So I don't buy the notion that more talks will produce more results, and I also don't buy the argument that more mutual understanding will promote a better idea, better approach to each other. Strategic trust. I wrote an essay with my friend Kenneth Lieberthal. In 2012, and the title of the essay was addressing strategic distrust between the United States and China, as if that was the central issue. Then I thought to myself, do people trust each other? Do politicians trust each other? And I found out that the Vice President of the United States did not trust the President of the United States. So how can China and the United States trust each other? So this is not the central problem. The central problem is we both have our domestic politics. And these domestic politics do not get along with each other. They depart from each other. And I will talk more about it on Thursday.
Right. Just a very quick, I know there are a few hands, but just a very quick intervention to pick on a point that you mentioned. You mentioned that in the past, the US wanted to change China, and it appears that you have given hope, right? It appears that China is not a competitor. I don't want to change China. Then how about China? Has it given up hope on the US?
Now we have given up hope. I'm very confident in saying this. I talked to some policymakers and others, and they, well, how can we improve relations with that country which tries to contain China? It is openly saying that China is a bad country. They want to contain China. It's not like the old days. I know when G.W. Bush said, China is no longer a competitor, when common grounds, and then during the Obama years, they emphasized climate change, non-traditional security issues. Now, from Obama, from Trump to Biden, we have very few people in the United States who are arguing that they should improve relations with China. They have their political correctness in denouncing China. We have our political correctness to denounce the United States.
Okay, I saw a few hands. I think I'll take, because you're running out of time, I'll take all these questions at a go, right? So there's a lady over there, one question, and then I think I saw another hand. So yeah, these are the final two questions.
Thank you very much, for the excellent talk. I'm Zhou Taomo, Associate Professor of History at NTU. So as a historian, the securitization of everything sounds very similar to Mao era, like perception of imminent threat, Beijing Beihuang war preparedness. So I wonder to what extent do you agree with this idea that the Xi era is kind of a repetition of the Mao era, and the current kind of antagonism between the US and China is a Cold War 2.0, and there was a time when China was seeing itself as the center of the universe. That was during the Cultural Revolution. That didn't end up so well. So I was wondering whether you personally, as someone who witnessed the era, experienced through the era, whether you see history repeating itself.
Okay, there's one final question over there by the lady. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for sharing and your presentation. My name is Zhang Lei, and I'm an IR student from RSIS. So basically on your presentation, I'm wondering that you mentioned 16 security areas in the comprehensive national security, and which was emphasized by the Chinese President Xi Jinping. But I'm wondering that, as you say, there is a securitization of everything, but in practice, can a state pursue all this security at the same time? And do you believe that there is a hierarchy or ranking inside this 16 security goals, and how does it differ from the previous generations of Chinese leader and the Xi Jinping's government?
Okay, so two questions. This question is Xi Jinping's similar to a Mao's era?
I think these two questions are related to each other. Some people in China are worried that we are going back to the old days of Mao years, emphasizing 自力更生 or self-reliance, and now we have a new phrase called the indigenous innovation, emphasizing again on technological innovation depending on China's own resources. But I'm firmly confident that we cannot cut our relationship with the outside world for our technological development. For instance, some people are talking about China's new commercial aircraft called C919. C919. That is indigenously produced, but they cannot cut down their cooperation with Boeing and Airbus, because many equipment and technology are theirs, not ours. Some people say 95% of the aircraft is made in China, but that is important to know that 5% is more important than the 95%. So I don't think we will move back to these old days. The philosophy is there, saying, well, they will have the dual circumvent, that is indigenous and local, and then international. We should combine the international market with China's domestic market. That's a good philosophy, but we cannot simply do one thing, forgetting the other. I'm confident that we'll have to continue to seek economic and technological cooperation. And there are some alternatives, especially the European countries, and to some extent Japan and Canada. But the United States is still the most important technological country in the world. So technically and practically we cannot separate ourselves from the other parts of the world. Your question is?
Relating to the 16 areas of security which you showed, and he's wondering, is there a hierarchy? Is all of them equally important?
No. It's a very theoretical question. Can we really have priorities, one after another? This is more important, the second important, third important. In our daily life is difficult. Everything is important. So in our diplomatic definition, a few years ago, we say in the foreign minister says, 大国是关键, big powers are key link, 周边是首要, surroundings, peripheries are primary. 周边是首要，周边是发展中国家是基础 ，developing countries are the basis, foundations of foreign policy, and then, all the countries have already discussed great powers and surroundings, and then developing countries, but the international department of the foreign ministry complain. Where are they? And we have then 多边是舞台, multilateralism is the platform. So comprehensive, everything is important, everything is priority. So I half joke to India's ambassador to China. I say, according to this philosophy, India is the most important country to China. India is a big power. India is a neighbor. India is a developing country. India is important in multilateralism. No other country can be as important as India. United States is not our neighbor. And Indonesia is not a big power at the time when we're talking about. So the setting priority in theory is easy, but I don't think national security is everything. It's not meant to be a criticism of the philosophy, but in practice, when you say something is important, you should be given you should give priorities to other problems and different. In the example I was illustrating, you have different departments in the foreign ministry dealing with different countries, different problems, and you have different agencies in your own government. When the top leaders goes to the national security apparatus, he will say national security is most important. But if he goes to the Ministry of Finance, it's pointless to say national security is most important because finance is also very important. If it's part of national security, he might also say, well, finance is very important because it's part of national security, which is what part of the society is not part of security. So securitization is comprehensive. So you can defend everything by saying, well, this is part of security. Education is security.
Right. So in sum, everything is important.
Right.
Important. Okay. Everyone, I believe all of us have had a very insightful time learning from and hearing from Professor Wang Jisi. Ideally, I would like this to carry on, but as they say, all good things must come to an end. And with that, let us put our hands together to warmly thank Professor Wang Jisi again. Thank you.